Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Our reading this morning is from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word.
So this is the first Sunday in what we call our stewardship season. And if this is your first time to spend the fall with us, we typically set aside a month every fall to reflect on the idea of stewardship. It culminates in a commitment Sunday, which for us will be November 19th, where we ask you to make a commitment to the church for the coming year. But stewardship it's really so much bigger. It's so much more than just what you give to the church. Stewardship is about how we render our lives back to our Creator. And so it's time that we kind of set aside to ask big questions of like, how is God present in our lives? How are we seeing God's goodness? And how are we responding faithfully to it? So we chose for this season of stewardship the idea of seasons. Just as there are seasons in any given year, there are seasons in life. Seasons of growth and seasons of loss. Seasons of normalcy and then seasons of rapid change, and seasons of blessing and seasons of adversity. There are seasons all the time. I think about in my own life, when I look back, I can see certain seasons. And like especially as a parent, I look back, there was a season of life where I was exhausted all the time and yet also somehow full of wonder. There was a season of my parenting where I watched way too much children's programming. Doc McStuffins, Paw Patrol, some of these shows are still around today, which blows my mind. Thank goodness in that season of my life, I was able to steer the kids away from Barney and Teletubbies. That would have been the ultimate punishment, right? And then that season was followed by, there was a sports season where we spent every Saturday at the soccer field or the baseball park. I even coached my kids for some of that time. There's a season where we joked, I was a professional, Jane and I, we said we're professional drivers. We just chauffeur our kids around from activity and place to place, and always a party and always a friend's house to go to. And now we're in this season where my kids are in high school and we get to enjoy who they're becoming. But we just wrapped up a season of taking my daughter to colleges for her to visit, and now she's applying, and we see a season on the horizon where we're gonna get to experiencing, parenting without our kids living in our home. And I guess what I'm saying is that's just in the realm of parenting. I think about a marriage, and I think there's a whole different set of seasons. There's a season of falling in love and discovering everything about the other person. There's a season of adventure, of setting off and doing great things. For us, that was going and living in Haiti. There's a season of settling. There's a season of partnership where we work together, raise kids together. And then there are seasons within every marriage where you get out of sync, where things don't come easy and you have to work to kind of get back on the same page with each other. And then I think in career, in my life as a pastor, there's been different seasons. There was a season of discernment, of kind of figuring out my call. There was a season of hustle, where I just did everything I could as fast as I could because I didn't know exactly what I should do, so I just did it all. There was a season of growing confidence in my skills and my expertise, and there's a season of leadership. And I know, like I said, and then there's seasons where you have to figure it all out all over again because what you thought you knew, you really don't know. And that's, in all these cases, work, parenting, marriage, I know there are seasons I haven't even lived into. My point is, if you think back on your life, you can probably think of these seasons. Right? Seasons that you've gone through. And some of these seasons, it's not that seasons move in a straight line. Sometimes they overlap with each other. Sometimes you can be in multiple seasons sometimes at the same time. But here's my point, is some seasons we move through only once, but some seasons have a way of cycling back around again and again in our life. Maybe the circumstances are different. Maybe we're different people. But we get into a moment where we kind of say, oh, I know this season. I know what this feels like. I've been here before. So let's kind of define what we mean by a season. When I use the word season, what I mean is this. It's a set period of time in which God is working for a specific purpose. Let's break that definition down. It's a set period of time, which means seasons have boundaries. They have beginnings and they have endings. As Darius Rucker's saying, it won't be like this for long. Whether you're going through a great season or a season that you can't wait to get past, that this too will pass. Seasons are just for a set period of time. But to me, the most powerful part of this definition is the second part, in which God is working for a specific person, for a specific purpose. God sets and ordains the seasons. Psalm 104 declares, God made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows when to go down. God ordains the seasons. God sets the boundaries of each season, and God is present in every season, working according to a specific purpose. Whether the season is one we enjoy or whether the season is one we're just grinding through, God is present. God is doing something according to his good purpose and plan in order to a greater plan to bring about something good in our lives and in our world. So with that kind of backdrop of what seasons are, let's talk about stewardship then. Because stewardship, as I said, is more than just what we give. It's more about finances. It's about how we render unto our Creator our lives, our days, our months, our seasons. So one way to look at stewardship is to kind of look at through this lens of seasons and kind of ask the question, what season am I in? How is God present in this season? And how is God calling me to faithfully respond in this season I am in right now? That's stewardship. So let's kind of use the story of ancient Israel as an example. We've kind of spent the last few months going through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. So I'm going to pick up the story from there. I was looking for like this pictogram that I could show you that would like depict Israelite history in one page. And if you try Googling it sometimes, you're going to get crazy complicated stuff like this image on the screen. I'm not going to use that. Wipe that away. We're going to just kind of go through a handful of seasons, if you will. So let's pick up, Joseph down in Egypt. His family moves down there. And let's pick up the story from there. The first season I thought about was a season of liberation, freedom. The people of Israel were 400 years in slavery in Egypt, and then God sent a liberator, Moses, to set them free. A season of freedom and liberation. And that was followed by a season of wandering. For 40 years, a full generation, they wandered around in the desert. And then came a season of settling as the people entered into the promised land, the land of Canaan, and they started to put down roots and build a nation. And this season took centuries for them to begin to form themselves, into a nation. And then came a season of bounty, a season of plenty, of blessing, especially under the reign of David and Solomon. Israel reached its peak, its empire expanded to its greatest amount. And then, unfortunately, after Solomon, things began to fall apart. They entered into a season of conflict and division. The division was so sharp that Israel split between a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, kingdoms that were never again joined together in history. And then that season of conflict and division, it led to a season eventually of discipline, because the people wandered so far away from God that God felt that he had to finally discipline them. He sent the prophets to warn them. And then the Assyrians came and wiped out northern Israel. And the Babylonians came and they took southern Judah and the capital city of Jerusalem and carried the Israelites off into exile. But after 40 years, interesting enough, 40 years in exile, 40 years in the wilderness earlier, after 40 years in exile, God liberated them again, and he brought them back home. And that began a season of, well, it was a kind of a dual season of both scattering and rebuilding. There was a season of scattering because the people, not all the people came back to Israel. Some of them stayed in Babylon and elsewhere in the ancient world, the diaspora. And at that point, they were called to live faithfully among the other nations. But for those Israelites who returned, it was a season of rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the walls, rebuilding their home. And yet their rebuilding didn't reach the former glory that they'd once known. And so then they entered into a season of waiting. And you might even call this a season of silence. Because while they were waiting for a Messiah, the promised one to come and restore the nation of Israel, it was also a season of silence because the last prophet who spoke was Malachi around 400 BC. So for 4 centuries, Israel waited and waited and waited for its Messiah. So there you have it, Israel's story in about 2 minutes, going through the different seasons of its history: liberation, wandering, settling, prosperity, conflict, division, discipline, scattering, and silence. If you get those weekly devotions that we've been doing this fall, we took a break last week. We're going to resume it this week. And I'm going to, my daily devotions this week kind of reflect on each of these seasons. So we'll take a deeper dive into daily devotions. If you don't get those, simply write that on your prayer request card, or when you check in online, let us know that you'd like to receive those daily devotions, and we'll take a deeper dive into each of these. But my point is this: was there ever a season in which God was absent? No. God was present in each and every one of those seasons. Even in the season of silence, even in the season of waiting, God was present. God was working. God was actively doing something to build his kingdom, to call and form his people. God was always present, and he was asking Israel always to respond to the work that he was doing. In a season of wandering, when they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years, what was God trying to teach Israel? He was trying to teach them to trust me, live in daily dependence on me. In their season of prosperity, what did God most want for them? He wanted them to remember the source of their prosperity. He didn't want them to forget, where their blessings came from, to chase after false gods. Remember, be faithful to me. In season of discipline, because the people did forget and they chased after false gods, well, then God called them to repentance. He disciplined them, but so that they might return to him, so that they might remember and return and repent of their sin. And even in the silence and in the waiting, God was still teaching Israel what it meant to hope, what it meant to believe that God could still do a new thing in their midst. In every season, there's the work that God does, which then calls forth from us a response of faith. So now that we've looked at Israel's history, it poses the question: in what season are we as a church? Well, there's lots of different ways that we could answer that question. To borrow some of the words I just used about Israel's history, you could say that we are in a season of rebuilding right now. We're coming out of a global pandemic, and we are rebuilding. And there's signs of that rebuilding, signs of hope all around us, even if we haven't necessarily reached the former glory. But actually in some places, in our children's ministry, in our senior adult ministry, we have higher attendance in some areas than we had pre-COVID. So there's some good things happening there. This past year, we doubled the size of our Stephen ministry. We've started small groups and new care groups. I mean, there's a lot of good things that we started. Our Wednesday Connect Live, which was kind of a rebirth of something that existed pre-COVID, and that's been a wonder. We are rebuilding, and there are signs of hope that abound. But we're also in a season of scattering, right? Because on any given Sunday, COVID changed, the pandemic changed the way people connect to church. On any given Sunday, we have over 200 households that are connecting with our church remotely. And hi, everybody. Glad you're with us this morning. And the thing is that's a blessing and a gift, how we're able to connect to people all over the country. Some people who are part of our church and have moved away, people who spend part of the year in warmer climates, college students who are away at school, people who are sick, unable to physically come to church. We're able to stay in connection with so many people. And this is a blessing and a gift, but it does pose questions for us of what does it look like to care for both those who are here and those who are online. How do we meaningfully connect into our community, spiritually nourish those who are connecting with us remotely? It's a season of scattering. At the same time, it's a season of rebuilding. And then on top of that, we look on the horizon, and we perhaps have a little fear about what's going to happen next year in our denomination. Next year, the General Conference is going to meet. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know decisions will be made that will affect our church. And so we're kind of in a season of waiting, prayerfully waiting and hoping and waiting to see what's going to happen. But in that season of waiting, it also opens up that we're kind of in a season of conflict too. Because we don't all see eye to eye around issues of human sexuality and the way we understand the Bible and the way we understand, what faithfulness looks like in that area. And that's that fear, is that we might be heading into a season of division eventually. And all these things, all these ways of describing this season are true, which is kind of what makes it such a confusing season for us as a church, good and bad. It's like Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, the best of times and the worst of times, all happening at the same moment. And so, I want to take us back to Ecclesiastes. Up in the booth, this is not in my script, so just hang with me a second. I want to take us back to Ecclesiastes a second. Because after those verses that Linda read a moment ago, the time for war, time for peace, time for love, time for hate, after that comes this little passage, the extra 4 verses. He says, I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds, into our minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. Even though there are seasons, even though God has put in us a sense of the past and the future and the present, we don't know what God is doing from beginning to end. I like the Message translation sometimes, and I like how he does this. He says, true, God made everything beautiful in itself and in its time, but he's left us in the dark so we can never know what God is up to, whether he's coming or going. We're living in a confusing season. And Ecclesiastes says, it's always confusing. We never know what God is doing. We never know. He's given us a sense of the purpose and the seasons of all things, but we never know exactly what God's purpose is. And this is not to Ecclesiastes has this strain of pessimism, right? This isn't to be bad news, I don't think. Because he goes on to say, he says, for it is God's gift, that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in their toil. And I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken away from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. Yes, the season is confusing, right? It's crazy. But Ecclesiastes says, first, it's a gift. is God's gift to us, that each of us should live and drink and spend time with people we love and work. That is God's gift to us. And it's mystery that we don't really know what season in here, because what has been, what is already was, and what to be already is, and God seeks out the differences and all these things. There's mystery. God is doing something we don't know what the point is. And the end result of this, God has ordained it as such so that we might be in awe before God. So that we might knock that chip off our shoulder that says we're the ones in control. We're the ones directing the seasons. We're not. God is in control. And we are meant to live in faithful relationship and trust with him. So here's what I want you to know. Here's what I want you to remember. Whatever season you may be in, whatever season we may be in as a church, we can trust that God is active and present in this season right now. And God calls us to live in faithful response to him in this season, in the here and now. That's the call upon our lives, to render under God this moment, this season, without full understanding of who God is or what God is doing, but to live in trust and faithfulness. If we find ourselves in a season of anxiety, which we are in a season of anxiety, what are we called to do? We're called to trust. If we're in a season of conflict, which we are in a season of conflict, not just in our church, but in our world, what are we called to do? Faithfully, we are called to be peacemakers, to love our neighbor, to love one another with the love that Christ has loved us. And if we're in a season of uncertainty, a season of waiting, what are we called to do? We're called to hope. We're called to cultivate hope in our lives by prayer, by opening our eyes, by opening our spirit to what new thing God might be doing among us, to faithfully wait and trust and hope. So here's your homework this week. I'm going to give everyone homework. I want you to do this. I just want you to read, we heard it a minute ago, but I want you to reread slowly and prayerfully Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 8. Read it in multiple translations if you have them. And I want you to circle, I know some people feel like it's, desecrating the Bible to write in it. It's not. Circle the words that speak most powerfully to you in this moment, in this season of your life, and then ask yourself these 3 questions. First, God, what season am I in right now? Where am I with you right now? Secondly, how am I experiencing God right now? God, where are you? And if you're in a season of silence and you feel like God's not really speaking or showing up right now in your life, that's okay. Be real with God in that way. But trust that God is still present and active, even if you can't see it, even if you can't feel it. Maybe pay attention instead. What is God doing in me? What is God growing in me in this moment? And then thirdly, how can you faithfully respond to God in this season? What is God calling you to do to faithfully respond to his goodness, his work, his presence in this season? Remember, God created the seasons. He knows their beginning and their end. This too shall pass. But God is present in every season. And my hope and my prayer is that someday we will look back on this season right now and we will see, it was a mystery to me, but I know God was present. God used this season. God filled this season. And because of that, I can say it was good. Not because I enjoyed it, not because it was an easy ride, but it was good because God created it and God filled it and God used it. And anything God creates is good because God is good all the time in every season. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Bob Drolley, and I am the Director of Congregational Care here at Zionsville UMC. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend some time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all of our contact information is at the bottom of each web page. You can also connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under the username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.